In the quiet suburbs of Naples, Florida, where white picket fences line the streets and the sound of sprinklers fills the air each morning, life seemed ordinary. But as many who follow true crime stories know, it's often in the most peaceful places that the most disturbing secrets are kept. This story, brought to you by True Crime Case Resolution, will take you deep into a hidden romance that spiraled out of control and turned into something far more sinister. It all began with Megan Barrett, a woman in her early 40s who lived a seemingly perfect life. She had a beautiful home, a successful husband, and 2 teenage kids who attended one of the top schools in the area. The Barretts were a well-respected family in Naples, where neighbors waved from across the street, and the local community gatherings always had them front and center. But behind the scenes, things were far from perfect. Megan had grown tired of the routine. Her husband, Roger, worked long hours at his law firm, and her kids were more interested in their friends and social media than spending time at home. Megan felt isolated and craved attention, the kind that reminded her of her youth when she was carefree and desired. And then, one sweltering summer afternoon, he arrived, Jason Stone, the new pool boy. Jason was only 26, with sun-kissed skin, a charming smile, and a physique that caught Megan's attention from the moment she saw him. It started innocently, small talk about the weather, light jokes about how often the pool needed cleaning. But over time, their conversations grew longer, and the looks they exchanged held a new kind of tension, one that Megan hadn't felt in years. It wasn't long before their relationship crossed the line from harmless flirtation to something more. Roger, always distracted by his work, never noticed. He would leave early in the morning and come back late at night, assuming his family was as perfect as the picture they portrayed to the world. Megan, on the other hand, was living a double life, one as a dutiful wife and mother, and the other as a woman consumed by her affair with a much younger man. Jason wasn't just some fleeting crush for Megan, he became her escape. They would meet up in secret places, empty parking lots, cheap motels on the outskirts of town, and sometimes right there in the pool house when Roger was away. Their connection, fueled by lust and secrecy, grew stronger, and soon, Megan found herself doing things she never thought possible, lying, sneaking around, and covering her tracks with precision. But secrets like these never stay hidden for long. One afternoon, Megan received a text from Jason asking to meet him at their usual spot by the pool. It was the middle of the day, and Roger was out of town on a business trip. The summer heat was oppressive, and the air felt heavy with anticipation. Megan slipped into a sundress and made her way outside, heart pounding with excitement. But when she got to the pool, Jason wasn't alone. Standing there, watching her with cold, dark eyes, was Roger. Megan froze, her breath catching in her throat. She had no idea how long he had been standing there, or what he had seen, but the look on his face told her everything she needed to know. Roger's usually calm demeanor was replaced by something dangerous, a mixture of betrayal, rage, and something else she couldn't quite place. For a long, tense moment, the three of them stood in silence, the sound of the water lapping gently against the pool's edge, the only thing breaking the stillness. Roger finally spoke, his voice low and trembling with anger. "How long?" he asked, eyes locked on Megan's. She couldn't speak, couldn't find the words to explain herself. All the lies she had been telling herself came crashing down in an instant. Jason shifted uncomfortably, realizing the gravity of the situation he had walked into. But Roger wasn't looking at Jason. His fury was directed entirely at his wife. That night, after Jason had left in a hurry, Megan and Roger had the argument of a lifetime. Words were thrown like weapons, cutting deep with every accusation and every truth revealed. Roger felt humiliated, betrayed by the one person he had always trusted. Megan, caught in her own web of deceit, tried to explain, but there was no excuse good enough to undo the damage that had been done. But instead of the marriage ending then and there, Roger made a decision. A dark, twisted decision that would send this story spiraling into chaos. In the days that followed, Roger acted strangely. He didn't file for divorce, didn't throw Megan out of the house. Instead, he became eerily calm. He would leave for work as usual, come home without a word, and sit in silence at the dinner table, staring at Megan as if she were a puzzle he was trying to solve. His coldness unsettled her, but what terrified her more was the growing sense that Roger wasn't done yet, that this wasn't over. One night, Megan found herself awake in the middle of the night, unable to sleep. She got up and went downstairs, only to find Roger sitting in the dark, his phone in hand, staring at the screen. When he noticed her, he quickly pocketed the phone and gave her a strange smile, one that sent chills down her spine. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. The next day, Jason didn't show up for his usual pool maintenance. Megan texted him, but there was no response. Hours passed, and soon, those hours turned into days. Jason had disappeared without a trace. Megan panicked, fearing the worst. Had Roger done something to him? Was this his revenge? She went to the police, but there wasn't much they could do. Jason was an adult, and it wasn't unusual for someone his age to simply up and leave town. But Megan knew better. She could feel it in her gut. Jason hadn't left willingly. Weeks went by, and Megan's anxiety grew. Roger, however, seemed unbothered by it all. In fact, he seemed to be thriving, relishing in Megan's fear and uncertainty. He began making cryptic comments, little remarks about how secrets have a way of catching up to people, and how everyone pays for their mistakes eventually. One evening, as Megan was clearing out some old papers from Roger's office, she stumbled upon something that made her blood run cold. A receipt for a large purchase of cement and construction supplies dated just a few days after Jason's disappearance. She confronted Roger, but he denied everything, claiming it was for a renovation project he had started at his office. But Megan wasn't convinced. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and she realized she had underestimated just how far Roger was willing to go to get his revenge. And that's when the phone call came. Late one night, as Megan sat alone in the living room, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She hesitated for a moment before answering, her heart pounding in her chest. The voice on the other end was shaky, panicked. It was Jason. "I need help," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "He's after me." Before Megan could ask where he was, the line went dead, leaving her in a state of shock. Jason was alive, but for how long? Megan sat frozen on the couch, the sound of Jason's whispered plea still echoing in her ears. Her hand trembled as she stared at her phone, willing it to ring again, hoping that Jason would call back and explain everything. But the silence was deafening. Her mind raced with a million possibilities. What had Jason meant? Who was after him? Was it Roger? As she tried to make sense of the cryptic phone call, her thoughts kept returning to the receipt she had found in Roger's office. The cement, the construction supplies, the eerie calm he had exhibited ever since he discovered the affair. It all pointed to one terrifying conclusion. Roger was involved in Jason's disappearance, and he wasn't done yet. Determined to find answers, Megan decided to take matters into her own hands. She couldn't go to the police without proof, not with just a phone call from Jason and a suspicious receipt. They would never believe her, especially given her tangled relationship with both men. But she couldn't sit idly by either, waiting for Jason's fate to unfold. If there was any chance to save him, she had to act now. Megan's first thought was to call Jason's phone again, but after several attempts, it was clear that the number was disconnected. Fear gnawed at her insides, but she couldn't give up. She needed to know where he was, and if Roger was really behind all of this. Her next step was to confront Roger. That night, she waited for him to come home, watching the minutes tick by as her anxiety grew. When he finally walked through the door, she noticed the same unsettling calm in his demeanor. His eyes met hers, and there was a flicker of something, amusement, maybe even satisfaction. Without waiting, Megan stood up and threw the receipt on the table between them. "What is this, Roger?" she demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. "What did you do?" Roger glanced at the receipt, then back at her, his expression unreadable. "I told you, it's for work," he said smoothly, his tone betraying none of the tension that radiated through the room. "I don't believe you," Megan snapped. "Jason called me. He said someone's after him. Is it you, Roger? What did you do to him?" For a moment, Roger didn't respond. He simply stared at her, the corners of his mouth twitching, as if he were holding back a smile. Then slowly, he leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. Maybe Jason should have stayed away from what wasn't his to take. Megan's breath caught in her throat. The casual, almost dismissive way Roger spoke sent chills down her spine. It was as if Jason's life meant nothing to him, as if he were just another obstacle that Roger had dealt with, but dealt with. How? Before she could press him further, Roger turned away, walking into the kitchen and leaving her standing there, reeling. It was clear now. Roger knew exactly where Jason was, and worse, he didn't care what happened to him. Desperation clawed at Megan's chest. If she didn't act fast, Jason's life could be in grave danger. With her heart pounding, Megan realized she had only one option left. She had to find Jason herself. But where would he be? The construction supplies, the cement. Roger must have stashed him somewhere remote, somewhere no one would think to look. Megan thought back to all the places Roger had mentioned over the past few weeks. Then it hit her, the old family cabin in the woods near Ocala. They hadn't been there in years, not since the kids were little, but Roger had made an offhand comment about needing to fix it up recently. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it. But now, everything clicked into place. That night, when Roger had fallen asleep, Megan quietly packed a bag, her mind racing with possibilities. She didn't know what she'd find at the cabin, but it was the only lead she had. As she slipped out of the house, the darkness outside felt suffocating, but she couldn't turn back now. The drive to Ocala was agonizingly long. The roads twisted through dense forests, the headlights of her car slicing through the blackness. Every mile felt like an eternity, her anxiety growing with every passing minute. When she finally arrived, the cabin stood eerily silent in the distance, illuminated only by the faint glow of her car's headlights. Megan's heart pounded in her chest as she approached the cabin. The air was thick with the smell of damp wood and pine, and the night was eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. As she neared the front door, she saw that it was slightly ajar, as if someone had left in a hurry. She stepped inside, her hands shaking as she flicked on a light. The cabin was in disarray, furniture overturned, papers scattered across the floor. But what caught her attention was the unmistakable smell of fresh cement coming from the back room. Megan's stomach dropped. As she approached the source of the smell, her mind raced with fear and dread. What if she was too late? What if Jason was already... Before she could complete the thought, she heard a faint noise, a weak, muffled sound coming from the corner of the room. Megan's heart leaped. She rushed forward, pulling open a heavy wooden door that led to the cellar. And there, lying on the cold concrete floor, was Jason. His hands were bound, his face bruised and pale, but he was alive. Barely. Megan dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face as she worked to untie him. "Jason," she whispered, her voice breaking with relief. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know." Jason's eyes flickered open, filled with pain and fear. "We have to get out of here," he rasped. "He's coming back." Panic surged through Megan as she realized the danger they were still in. Roger could return at any moment, and if he found them here, there would be no escaping his wrath. She helped Jason to his feet, his weight heavy against her as they made their way back to the car. As they drove away from the cabin, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. Jason was safe, for now, but the nightmare was far from over. Roger wouldn't let this go. He was a man who thrived on control, and now that his carefully constructed world had begun to crumble, he would stop at nothing to rebuild it, even if it meant silencing the two people who could destroy him. Megan knew they couldn't go to the police yet, not without solid evidence, but they also couldn't keep running forever. As they drove into the night, Jason weak and injured beside her, Megan realized that they were caught in a deadly game of cat and mouse, one that would only end when Roger was brought to justice. But justice, as Megan was about to learn, doesn't always come easily. Sometimes it comes at a price. As the sun began to rise over the horizon, Megan knew they were running out of time. Roger was coming for them, and the only way to survive was to stay one step ahead. But could they? Or would Roger's dark, twisted revenge finally catch up with them? Only time would tell. Thank you for following this chilling story on true crime case resolution. Keep watching for updates as we uncover more shocking